Another day, another real-world test. Today, we're doing on the OnePlus 12R, the new mid-range phone from OnePlus. And if you remember the OnePlus of old that used to give people more than they expected for their money, people are kind of wondering if this phone can bring back some of that glory. So, we're gonna go explore as per the usual, all while we test out this phone. But, first things first. Coffee. Check. And in honor of this more budget-friendly phone, let's do another episode where we try to find less expensive eats here in New York City. Now, not as cheap as we found in the Nothing Phone 2A video, because that's just a cheaper phone than this, but food that is great that won't break the bank. And firstly, welcome to... It's kind of complicated. The place is called Getaway, but it's also called the Blue Light Speakeasy. Let me explain. So a long time ago, there used to be a cafe here in Greenpoint called Boudin, which has since gone out of business. They used to have different food companies come in on different days of the week. A ramen chef on Mondays only, for example. One of those days, they had a grilled cheese and breakfast sandwich company called the Blue Light Speakeasy. Eventually, the owner of which moved to LA, and that kind of ended their run here in New York City. But in 2020, she apparently returned as the Blue Light Speakeasy reappeared as a pop-up at this non-alcoholic bar that, if we're honest, might have been a bit before its time, called Getaway. Now though, they've moved from being a pop-up to being pretty permanent inside Getaway. They have a rotating menu Wednesday through Sunday. Wednesdays only having double-decker breakfast tacos, breakfast burritos on Thursday, etc. Today, Friday, are breakfast sandwiches, and I've got a fling with scrambled eggs, chives, sharp cheddar, crispy onions, and sriracha aioli on an onion poppy seed bun. It's honestly some of the most complex and delicious breakfast food around. Speaking of things that are great for the money, let's start with the screen on the OnePlus 12R. Now, it's technically a smaller screen by just a hair compared to the OnePlus 12, but you'd never notice, and it has a slightly lower resolution, but everything else is the same. 120 Hz adaptive refresh rate that can drop down to 1 Hz to save power, and same super high brightness that allows me to see it in bright daylight without an issue, a thing traditionally missing on a lot of phones in this price range. That screen, like the OnePlus 12, is slightly curved, which makes it look a bit more premium maybe, but it's not so curved that you'd be too annoyed with it, thankfully. Water resistance is lower on the 12R at IP64, so it's splash resistant basically, versus the IP65 of the 12, which means that water jets hitting it are fine. And that's compared to the IP67 of the Pixel 8a and the Samsung A55, which means that they can be submerged for up to 30 minutes in up to a meter of water. Just good things to consider depending on your level of clumsiness. Lastly, for notable things about the design, we have the alert slider that people seem to like on OnePlus phones that allows you to move it to switch from ring to vibrate to silent with the switch. I personally just set it to vibrate and then I never touch it again. Now, the rest of this phone actually resembles the 12 so much that you'd have a hard time telling the difference. I haven't been here in a long time, but this is La Superior. And continuing with our theme, it's a great spot for a taco and a beer that will break the bank. I remember actually coming here a long time ago, and it's always been less about the food and more about the drinks and the diner-like vibes. But with that said, the food is solid and relatively cheap. They have tacos, of course, and a ton of different kinds, which are good, but the queso fundito, especially if you put chorizo or mushrooms or both in it, is great, as is the chicken flautas. And if you want a taco, go for the carnitas or even the lengua, which is tongue. Oh, also they have a solid happy hour with $8 margaritas. All right, this brings us to the cameras on the OnePlus 12R. And compared to its more expensive brother, the OnePlus 12, which has all proper larger cameras with higher megapixel counts that can all be binned to get larger pixels for better low light, this is where we start to see some of the cut corners on the 12R. Now, there are the same amount of cameras as the 12, technically, but while on the 12 they are actually larger camera sensors in the form of an ultra-wide main and a 3x optical zoom, on the 12R we have a pretty decent main camera if I'm honest, but the ultra-wide feels less good for sure, and that third camera, well, it's a 2 megapixel macro that I thought we finally saw the end of after berating companies for adding this bottom of the bin sensor that can easily be replaced by just adding a macro mode to the ultra-wide camera, as most companies do on their phones. It always just seems to be a way for any manufacturer to just get 3 cameras on a phone, just to say that there are 3. On the front, the selfie camera, we have a smaller sensor as well, and that front camera can only shoot at 1080p compared to the 4K on the OnePlus 12. But on the rear, you at least still get up to 4K 60, but only on the main lens and the digital zooms beyond it. You do lose 8K recording in 24 frames per second that the 12 has, but frankly, no one ever uses that, so you won't miss it. Lastly on this food-filled, more frugal tour, welcome to Mabel's Smokehouse, a barbecue spot in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. It's a simple, no-frills kind of spot. Everything comes on butcher paper and a red lunch tray. You have all the staples that you expect, from brisket to pulled pork, and even the standard sides like mac and cheese, coleslaw, and all the rest. All of which are great, and not crazy priced. But something a bit more unique here, at least in New York, they have Frito pie, which, if you're not familiar, is a Texas snack of sorts. It's Fritos, the corn chip, with chili and cheese, and here they even are served in the bag, like proper. Now we have a tiny bit bigger battery on the 12R than the 12 in an unexpected plot twist, but here is my screen on time and usage for today. Just keep in mind, as usual, that this is a real-world test day and not a normal day, and I used my camera way more than you ever would. So here is another day that is not a real-world test day, so that you at least have something to compare it to. Honestly, the battery life is great. I mean, I don't ever feel the need to not use the phone to conserve power or get nervous at the end of like a long day that it's gonna die. And it has the same 100 watt fast charging, 80 watt here in the US because of our power grid, when using the Super VOOC charger that it comes with, just like the OnePlus 12. You only lose out on wireless charging, which is something that I am so used to and I miss on phones that don't have it, but it very well could be less of a sacrifice to you. Bottom line, the OnePlus 12R is a great phone for the money. It feels and it looks like a flagship, battery life is great, but the camera system as a whole isn't quite flagship level. And for this price, that would probably be fine still. But while I feel like the OnePlus 12 is actually a better deal compared to proper flagship phones, the 12R has a few solid competitors in the form of the Samsung A55 and the new Pixel 8a, which is the one that I personally would probably choose myself. And that just makes it a bit harder to decide. Regardless, it is a welcome contender in an underserved mid-tier market here in the United States. Which one would you rather have? Let me know in the comments below. Always appreciate hearing from you guys. Subscribe and ding the bell to get notified when I do new videos if you're not already. And that's it for me. I might actually try to go find one of those margaritas. Good night. Of course, as soon as I go to record, as soon as you hit record, that's when people start talking loudly near you. It's a law of nature. Pretty sure. Newton discovered it. I'm almost positive. This being a more truck? No, not even truck. Scooter. Scooter that sounds like a truck. Probably should get that scooter checked out, because that's not a good sound. And then, a massive truck. And a helicopter. Not as cheap as we did car. And plane? Plane. And then it sets off the car alarm. So now I have that, and that will never end.